Liberate IT is an Oracle NetSuite solution provider that has been servicing Australian and New Zealand companies since 2011.
Well, good morning, everyone. I think it's now turned to the hour, so a good time to kick off. Welcome to the latest Liberate IT webinar series. We go through a regular fortnightly training session for all of our customers. One session covers off some things that we think our customers might need to know a little bit more about NetSuite. And we're joined by Stefan here today that will take us through one of those topics. And in a fortnight's time, we'll be going through the regular third-party solutions that we also look after. So, if you're joining us from New Zealand, it's now 11 o'clock, and if you're in Australia, it's obviously 9 o'clock and 8 a.m. up in Queensland. So, I'm your host today, Andrew Liniger. I'm the new relationship manager for Liberate IT. I recently joined the business. I've had about 4 years of NetSuite experience and lots of years of experience looking after customers. So if there's anything that you're looking to do with NetSuite to improve it or enhance it so that you can improve your top line or get a better performance in your bottom line, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you and help you out. As I mentioned, this is a regular training event that we do. This is the last one from our consultant-led training for the year. And I'm really stoked with this topic. I think a lot of our customers will get a lot out of this. NetSuite have an event on next week. It's called NetSuite Build on Air, the Asia Pac edition. That is kicking off 17 November. That's a 3-day event. You're able to pick and choose the different webinars that you're going to join there. If you didn't get that email from NetSuite, reach out to me. It's andrew.liniger@liberateit.com. You should no doubt already have my email address, but just message me through this session and I can get you those details. In a fortnight's time, we have our last of our third-party solutions, and that's the Satori Microsoft Power BI solution that we're going to be demonstrating. We're going to invite that crew in to demonstrate that for you. As we head into the new year, I'm really keen to get some ideas from you. If you have any topics, particularly around NetSuite, that you're going, I just want to know a little bit more about that, please send those suggestions through to us. That will help us build something that's relevant to you next year. We really believe that this should be a client-led event. So if there is something that you are interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out. In terms of the rundown today, we're going to be going through vendor prepayments in NetSuite. It's a relatively new feature, released a couple of releases ago, and that means NetSuite is slowly improving it as they go as well. Really stoked that Stefan's going to be able to take you through that today. We're recording today's session, so if there is anything that you think you've missed or we've gone too fast, we will definitely send that out through to you. And if there is, if you've got any questions at all, please do also hold those to the end of the PowerPoint presentation. So Stefan's going to do a bit of PowerPoint. We know you love that, but it does set the scene for you so that you actually understand the context of what we're going to be talking about. Opportunity for some questions there. If once we get through those, Stefan's going to go through a bit of a demonstration of the solution for you and take you through that. So running the session today will be Stefan Gerard. He's one of our functional consultants. He's based down in Melbourne. So just recently experienced lockdown and just come out of that. So he's pretty happy about that now. Stefan's got about 3 years of experience of NetSuite consulting. He's one of our younger members of the team, but one of our more experienced guys. And so we're really stoked to have him. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Stefan. Stefan, welcome.
Thanks for the introduction, Andrew. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So just let me know once you can see it. So can you see the PowerPoint?
We sure can.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. All right. So let me just get into it straight away. So we're going to look at a pretty cool feature called vendor prepayment. I'm not sure if many of you are using it. If you're not using it, this webinar, pretty sure this webinar will help you start using it on NetSuite. And for anyone who's already using it on NetSuite, I'm going to go through all the enhancements that NetSuite has released in the couple of last releases. And yeah, so it's going to be a pretty good webinar. The vendor prepayment feature has been available for the last, I think for the last 3 releases, and every release they've been enhancing it and giving in new features with it. So what is vendor prepayment? Vendor prepayment is basically your ability to track deposits or payments to your vendors well before the bill has been created into NetSuite. So this avoids you using any journals or external notes, because I've actually witnessed this with a few clients. They usually track this outside of NetSuite, and when the day comes to pay out these vendor bills, they have no idea that they paid a part of it, so it's always going to be double payment. So with the help of vendor prepayments, that's going to stop, and everything's going to be on NetSuite. So without further ado, let's go ahead. So this is a bit of an overview. This is a standard NetSuite flowchart. You could find this on your Suite Answers and your help section. So I'm not going to dive too much into this, but let me just annotate over here. Give me 1 second. All right. So the vendor prepayment consists of, I would say, 3 major parts. One is your vendor prepayment. So this is what you would create on NetSuite once you've made the deposit to that vendor. So once this is done, you have the option to associate it with a purchase order or not. So if you do not associate it with a purchase order, it's pretty simple. Once this is done, create the vendor bill in a week's time or a few days' time. And once that's created, you can apply it directly to the vendor bill, and it works as a payment. So that's one way of putting it. The other one is, if there is a purchase order, then you have the option of assigning that vendor prepayment to a purchase order. And if you have the auto application features enabled, then none of your users need to do anything. Once you create the purchase order and a bill from that purchase order, the prepayment is going to be automatically applied to the bill. So we'll look into it further in the coming slides and in a demo that I have ready as well. So I'm just going to go ahead with it. All right, so prerequisites, these are the things that you would need to set up before you can start using prepayments. Number 1, as like any other feature, you would need to enable this. So this would be on your setup, company enable features. And under your accounting subtabs, you can see right there, there's a vendor prepayments checkbox. You'll have to check that as your number 1 step. Once that is done, your next one would be creating a prepayment account. Obviously, you would need the administrator role for this, or any role that has access to all your chart of accounts. So this can be an existing account, or it can be a new account that you're creating. The only thing that you would have to note is it should be a other current asset type. So in this case, what I've done for our demo account, I've created a new account called vendor prepayment. As you can see, it's a other current asset. So this is step 2, and step 3 would be your accounting preferences, which is again on setup, accounting preferences. I'll show this to you in the demo, but just a screenshot. You can see a screenshot over here. So the vendor prepayment account, this is where you would have to default the account that you're using. So this is more of a company-wide default account, but as I mentioned on the PowerPoint, you could, if you're using OneWorld, you could also have this set up for different subsidiaries on your subsidiary. The other feature over here is the auto apply vendor prepayments. So we'll dive into it in the next couple of slides. But what this does is basically, if you enable this, any vendor prepayment that is associated with a purchase order, NetSuite would apply it to the bill automatically without you having to go and manually apply it. And you can also toggle it and disable it. If you disable it, then you would have to manually apply the vendor prepayments. So yeah, so these are the 3 prerequisites that you need before you can start using vendor prepayments. And yeah, so let's go ahead with vendor prepayments. The way you can access this on NetSuite is just like a vendor bill. So transactions, payables, and enter vendor prepayments. And just like any other transaction, you could have your reminders, custom searches on your dashboard, and shortcuts created for this. So it makes it much easier for you. The vendor prepayment process consists of two different transactions on NetSuite. So one is your vendor prepayment. So this is what you would create on NetSuite when you make the deposit to the vendor. So this is just the initial vendor prepayment, which goes into the vendor prepayment account. And the second part is the vendor prepayment application. So this is when the bill has been created on NetSuite, and you're going to go ahead and apply that vendor prepayment to the bill. So this can be in a day's time, a week's time, or whenever the bill comes through to you. So I just have a few screenshots of a vendor prepayment. So this is how the vendor prepayment looks, just like any other transaction. As you can see, there's no line levels over here. It's just the payment amount. So whatever the payment amount is, you'll have to put that here, put in who the vendor is, and most of the other fields populate automatically. Obviously, you can add your classifications and your memos to it. Just to give you a quick thing. This prepayment account, this is default. So this is what I showed you on the accounting preference. So whatever you put in as your default over there, that would show up over here. And if it's based on the subsidiary, then it would look at the subsidiary field over here. And based on that, the prepayment account is chosen. So this is how it looks for the vendor prepayments. And the next one would be the vendor prepayment application. So this is when you apply that vendor prepayment to the vendor bill. So in this case, you can see that it is an application of vendor prepayment number 1. And you can see the total number of bills that this has been applied to. So it's been applied to 2 different bills, prepayment 1 and prepayment 2. The next topic we'll look at is the application of prepayments. So like I said, you could apply these manually or automatically. So there are some scenarios on how you could apply them. So the manual application can happen on both the scenarios. So the 2 scenarios being when you create a vendor prepayment with a purchase order and when you create a vendor prepayment without a purchase order. So if you create a standalone vendor prepayment that does not have a purchase order, there is no way that you could auto apply that because NetSuite does not know which bill it has to go and apply itself to. But then the only way is you can manually apply it. And similarly, for a vendor prepayment that has a purchase order associated with it, if your feature is enabled to auto apply, it will auto apply. So we look at the different scenarios in the next slides. Just gonna check if I have any questions. All right. So scenario A would be for any clients who do not use purchase orders. So I'm pretty sure there are customers who use both purchase orders and sometimes do not use purchase orders for certain bills. And there would be some customers who only use purchase orders and some who never use purchase orders. So this is a scenario where you do not use purchase orders. So you create the vendor prepayment and you do not tag it to any purchase order. It's just tagged to the vendor. And whenever the bill is created later on in NetSuite, that's when that AP clerk or whoever the user is would have to manually apply that vendor prepayment to the bill. So this would be a manual process. Auto application is not possible, like I said, because NetSuite does not know which bill to apply it to. In such a scenario, reminders and KPIs would come handy because you could always have that in your dashboard. And every day you could always come in and look at the top left of your screen, look at the reminders. Okay, there are a few vendor prepayments. Let me go have a look at it. Do I need to apply it to any bills? So that's how this would work. You could also have save searches that send out emails to you every day or whenever twice a day or whenever a new vendor prepayment is created. So that's totally up to you. And yep, we can look at that in the demos. The next one would be a scenario that has a vendor prepayment that has a purchase order. So while creating the vendor prepayment, you would have to tag it to a purchase order. And if your auto application feature is turned on, what NetSuite does is it basically looks at the oldest bill that the PO has generated. So the vendor prepayment will get tagged to the oldest bill. So if there are 3 bills that were created for a certain purchase order, then the vendor prepayment would be applied to the first bill that was created, so the oldest bill. And in some cases, you could also have different vendor prepayments. So you could have 3 vendor prepayments associated with 1 purchase order. So in such a scenario, NetSuite would apply the oldest prepayment to the oldest bill, and then so on. So it goes on from the oldest prepayment, then the second prepayment, and then the third prepayment, if there were 3 prepayments. So yeah, that's with the scenarios. Obviously, we're going to have a look at this on a live demo account. And yeah, so we've already come to the last part of the slide. So this is all the new release enhancements. So when vendor prepayments were first released, they did not have the ability to tag it to a purchase order. So there's no auto application. So that was released in the last NetSuite release. And this time, 20.2, these are the few enhancements that NetSuite has released. So the number one is your vendor prepayment approvals. So this just works just like any other vendor bill approvals or your AR invoice approvals. So you just have to turn on your suite approvals for vendor prepayment, and then you're going to get approval status field and a next approver field. So that's I'll show you how that works. And then you can also assign it to different approvers, and they can use the approve vendor prepayments page to approve these prepayments. The other enhancement, this is a pretty standard one, which is make a copy. So once you create any vendor prepayment, you could always edit it, go to the actions, and make a copy of that vendor prepayment. So this is pretty similar to all your other transactions where you could make copies on NetSuite. The next two are your vendor prepayment balance fields. So on your vendor profile or your vendor card, under the subsidiary subtab, on each subsidiary, you would have a vendor prepayment balance that always shows you what the vendor prepayment balance at that point of time is. So that's your vendor prepayment balance field in the subsidiaries. And then there is a similar vendor prepayment balance on your vendor prepayment page itself. So this gives you the total balance that's on your prepayment account. So not just specific to a vendor, it's the total balance of that prepayment account that you're using. And the final one, this is a pretty good announcement, which is importing the vendors using a CSV file. So this was not available before, and now it is available. So I have a demo set up, and if we have time for that, we could go ahead with it. All right. Yep. So I'm just going to go ahead with the demo now. But before I do it, Andrew, do we have any questions from the
Stefan? Yes, we do. We've got a question from Graham Henley. He's asked if a prepayment is auto-applied to the wrong invoice, is it possible to correct it?
Absolutely. So a vendor prepayment can be edited, and you can just delete the application, or you could just edit the vendor prepayment application, and you could choose the correct vendor bill to apply it to. So that's absolutely possible.
Brilliant. That's it, mate. We're ready to go with the demo.
Yep, that's cool. All right. So I'm just going to stop this. Give me 1 second.
And I see we've got our spring theme happening with the birds in the background, mate.
Oh, yes. Pretty good day. All right. So can you see my NetSuite screen now? The demo account?
Perfect. Sure do.
All right. So I'm just going to go ahead with the same process, which is number one, the prerequisites. So it'll be on your setup, company, and enable features. And on your enable features, you would have to go to your accounting subtab, and it's right below. So you have the vendor prepayments. This is number one. Once you check this, this is done. And then you move on to your account, which is over here. So I have my vendor prepayment account. Let me just show that to you. So I created this as a new account, but you could use an existing account, or you could create a new account as well. And please bear in mind that this is a demo account, and at times it's going to be pretty slow. So apologies for that. Yes, so the only thing you'll have to note from this is the type. It has to be an other current asset. And yeah, I've included it for all the subsidiaries. And the third step would be accounting preferences. It'll be on your general subtab. Just go down to accounts payable. Over here, accounts payable, and you have the vendor prepayment account. So this is your default vendor prepayment account, and this is for all your on a company level. So basically, it will be the same for all the subsidiaries unless you go and make a change to a certain subsidiary. So I'm going to show you that as well. But before that, this is the toggle on and off for auto apply. So if you use purchase orders and you want it to auto apply, or if you then you can enable it. But if you feel no, it's better if I manually go and apply it to the bill that I wanted to, then you could just go and disable it. So this is another option for you guys as well. And let me just go to the subsidiary before I move on to the vendor prepayments. So I'm using New Zealand for this demo. So let me edit the subsidiary. And yes, you would need the administrator access or any higher access for all of these. So once you're on the subsidiary, you need to go to the preferences, and you would have that right here. So you could also change it for the subsidy. So if I use any vendor, so if I change this vendor prepayment account to something else, and if I use a vendor that is from this subsidy, then the default prepayment account is going to be whatever is entered over here. So yeah, so that's pretty much everything with the setup and how you set up and get your account ready to use vendor prepayments. Let's go ahead with an example. So how do you access your vendor prepayments is transactions, payables, and enter vendor prepayment. You could use a list or you could directly create it from here. So let me open the list. So I have a few created already, but I'm going to create a new one. All right, so just like any other form in NetSuite, this can be totally customized. I'm using a more standard form for this demo, but if you have any custom fields that you want, absolutely can be included in this. This is the approval that I was talking to you about. So this has the approval status and the next approver. For our case, I'm going to just go ahead and approve it. But just to show you how you could approve your vendor prepayments is payables and approve vendor prepayments. So this takes you to, so if there are any approvers, they go to this page and they would see all the vendor prepayments that are awaiting their approvals over here. So let me go back at this and I'm going to choose my vendor. So I've created this vendor for this purpose. So my first scenario is not going to be with the purchase order. So I'm going to leave this blank. And this would be your bank account. So I'm just going to choose my NZ operating account for this case. So the currency is all fine for me. The date is all good. And like you can see, this is defaulted. You can't change it over here. It has to be changed on the company level or the subsidiary level. So that's done. If I want to make a memo, you can do that. It's a manual vendor prepayment. And subsidy is done. If I want to add a class, I can. So I'm just going to go to the class component and location Auckland. So my payment amount is going to be for 150. So this is a deposit that the vendor has asked for. And I'm going to go ahead and save this vendor prepayment. So as you can see, this is done. The vendor prepayment is paid. So it's officially paid to the vendor, but it hasn't been applied to any bill yet. So you can look at the GL impact. So it's from the bank account and it's debited the vendor prepayment account. So this is your vendor prepayment. It's a standalone one without any purchase order. So the next step for this would be applying it to a vendor bill. Just for the demo purposes, what I've done is I've already created a bill, but ideally in the real world, you would be creating the bill later on. So once you create that bill, the next step would be to come into the vendor prepayment and hit apply. So once I click on apply, it's just going to take me to another page. Like you can see, this is the second part, which is vendor prepayment application. I'm not going to make any changes to this. Everything looks good. And as you can see, any bills that are from this vendor will be shown over here. So you have the option to apply it manually, or you could also click on auto apply. So if you had 3 bills and say the amounts were different, if you hit auto apply and your vendor prepayment was a large amount, it would automatically apply to more than 1 or 2 bills. Or you could just go and manually apply it as well. So I've applied it to this one and let's hit save. All right, so the vendor prepayment application is saved. As you can see, it's tagged to the vendor prepayment itself. So if anyone uses sales orders and customer deposits, it's pretty similar to that. It's almost the same logic. So it's applied to the bill, and let me just have a look at the bill. All right, so the bill's open because I've not paid the full amount. And if I go to related transactions, you could see the vendor prepayment application has been applied at 150. So whenever you pay the bill, the next one, it's only going to show you the remaining amount for this. So this is an example with for vendor prepayments that are standalone and do not have a purchase order. So for the next example, let me do an auto application. So this was a manual application. Your AP clerks would have to track these vendor payments and make sure they have been applied at the right time. Give me 1 second. All right. Let me go ahead and create a new vendor prepayment now. So again, the same way, or I could also create a shortcut like I've done here. So vendor prepayment, and that takes me to the vendor prepayment page directly. So again, I'm using the same vendor. And in this scenario, I'm going to use a purchase order. So we have 416843. And the only difference you can see is once I put in the amount here, the purchase order value over here, it gives me the amount. So this is an automatic, it happens automatically. But if the deposit's going to be only half the amount, you could change the amount. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it as 1,150, not going to make a change to it. Hit approved. And everything else looks fine for me. So just the account. And this is the balance field that I was talking to you about. So this gives you the full balance of this prepayment account. So there is right now $2,500 in the prepayment account, and that's why it shows up over here. So let me go ahead and save this. So again, it's paid, so no real difference during the creation of the vendor prepayment. The only difference is in the next step, which is when the purchase order has been billed by the vendor. So obviously for auto application to happen, the bill has to be created from the purchase order. So either you click on the bill button, or you could also go to payables and bill purchase orders. So these are only two methods you can do it. You cannot create a standalone bill and expect this vendor prepayment to be applied to it. So that's something that you could note. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and bill this purchase order. All right, so the bill's done, approving the bill. And yep, so all that's good. So just keep a note on the bill when I save it. So obviously the bill is going to take a bit of time to save because of the demo account. But ideally, once this bill is saved, it should be paid in full because of the vendor prepayment. So if that happens, that means the auto application worked perfectly. So that's exactly what happened out here. So we have the bill created and automatically it's been paid in full. And if I go to the related transactions, you can see that the payment is a vendor prepayment application. So note that we did not, sorry. Someone's lawnmowing at the back of my house. I'm really sorry. But yeah, this vendor prepayment, this is the only difference with the auto application. The vendor prepayment was created automatically. And how I can know that is if I go to the system information, you're going to see that everything was set by the system and not by my user called Alex Wolf. So this is how an auto application works. And in this case, it was for the full amount. But if it was a bill that was created in different setups, so basically 2 or 3 different bills, then like I said, the vendor prepayment would be applied to the oldest bill or the bill that was created first on NetSuite. So yeah, so these are the 2 different scenarios with using a purchase order or without using a purchase order. And like I said, if I go back to the accounting preferences, just give me 1 second. And if I go to accounts payable, if this was toggled off, when I created that second vendor prepayment, the auto application wouldn't have happened. So that would have been a manual process. And let me just go back to this vendor prepayment application. And this was from the question that was asked earlier. What happens if the bill was, if the vendor prepayment was applied to the wrong invoice? This is what you do. You could just edit the application, come here. All right, so this has been applied to this one. I don't think that's the correct one. So let's unapply it and apply it to this instead. And that's how you would rectify a wrong application of a vendor prepayment. I'm just going to save that. And go back to, it's done. So back in my home screen, you can see, I'm just gonna refresh this. All right, so once I refresh this, you can see that there's a reminder with 3 vendor prepayments created this week. So this was because I created 2 right now and 1 before the webinar. So if you want to track, okay, so how many payments were created this week, you just click on the reminder and it brings up the save search for you. So this can be a reminder, or like I put it over here, it can also be a custom search on my dashboard. So this gives me the list of all the vendor prepayments that were created this week. So this can be customized based on how you need it. And yeah, it can also be sent to you via email using the save search functionality. So that's with vendor prepayments. How to create it, how to apply the vendor prepayments, the two different ways. So the other one that I want to go through is the balance. So I've already showed you the balance on the vendor prepayment page. There is another balance that we could look at, which is on the vendor. So I'm just going to open up the test vendor here. And when we go to the subsidiary, you can see that there's a prepayment balance of $1,000 over here. So this is the other new enhancement that NetSuite has released with the latest 20.2 release. So this is with the balance, and the final one would be the import. So I'm just going to go back into the transactions. Before that, I'm just going to stop sharing and share again. All right, so this is a sample. Can you see my Excel sheet, Andrew? Is this
Sure can.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right, so this is just a very basic import that I've created. So since we have time, I thought we'll have a look at this as well. So I'm using an external ID. This can be anything: the vendor's internal ID, the amount, the class, and the location. So this is what I've saved. And if I go back to NetSuite, so it will be setup, import, export, and usually you would have to go to import CSV records. But for the demo, I've already created a saved import, which is the vendor prepayment. So let me go to that. And yeah, so the import type would be transaction, and the record type is vendor prepayment. So this is one of the latest enhancements. And then you choose the file you want to upload, which is my VP import. I have that ready. And let's go ahead. So just like any other CSV import, you could add, update, or do both. So I'm going to add one, and I don't need any of the advanced options because this is the exact form that I need. So let me go to the next step. And since it's a saved one, I already have all of this pre-populated, but just going to run you through all of this. So the account, I've tagged it to the NZ operating bank account. Approval status is approved because we're not using the approvals for this demo account. I've tagged it to a class, which is on the Excel sheet, the vendor, which is on the Excel sheet, external ID, again on the Excel sheet, location, which is on the Excel sheet, and the amount as well. And finally, the date for this transaction. So as you can see, there are still some more fields that you could use, but for this scenario, I'm not going to use it. And let's go ahead and click next. So this is good. And all I'm going to do is run this import. Fingers crossed we don't have any issues with this. And yeah, so this is running. It should take a couple of, hopefully a few seconds. All right, so looks like there has been an issue, but just in case, what I've done is I've already done a CSV import before this webinar, knowing that there usually will be some issues with our demo accounts. So let me just go back to the vendor prepayment and hit list. And let me open up this one, which is all right. So this one, let me go to the system information. And yeah, so this is something that I created just before the webinar, you can see, and all of that was created using CSV. So there might be some issue with the external ID or something with that import, but yeah, but other than that, it should work pretty straightforward. So once that is imported, the vendor prepayment application has to be done manually, or it has to be done, it can be done as an auto apply using a purchase order. So yeah, I think that's more or less this, the whole process of vendor prepayments. Pretty straightforward, easy to start using. You just need to make sure your setup, your prerequisite setups are done. and your accounts, all of that is done. And once that's done, customize the forms and you're ready to go. So if obviously I'm gonna look at the any questions that has come through, but if you have if you want to try and enable this for yourself in your account, please go ahead. But if you need any help, please email Andrew or any of our consultants, and I'm pretty sure we can help you with this. And yeah, so Andrew, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. And
no problem.
Yep, I'm done.
Well, that's great, Stefan. Legendary effort. I think you were competing against a mother feeding its chicks and a lawnmower and and an alarm going off. So well done. You can't plan for these things. So well done. You did well to stay on track. Hey, we've got a bunch of questions actually, mate, that you might be able to help us out with. The first one is, does the prepayment generate any EFT payment file?
The prepayment, no, it does not create any EFT file.
Yep, great. It's more to reflect what's been done rather than transacting it. Would that be right? Yeah. Okay. And does this process work with multi-currency payments?
Yes, that it absolutely works, because on the vendor prepayment page, you do have the currency field, and that changes, and you can change that based on your vendor. So if your vendor has multi-currencies, you could go and change that from NZD to AUD or any other currency.
Great, thank you. Another question through, is it possible to rectify the incorrect auto-applied payment once the month is closed?
All right, so I haven't really looked into this, so I might have to check and get back to you. So probably we could send that back with our email with the recordings.
No problem, will do. And we had some questions through the chat, so just bear with me as I look for that.
I'm just looking at the chat, and I can see someone's asked if there are any precautions needed before enabling vendor prepayments, and if this webinar also covers the in-transit payments. So for the second question, no, this one is just with the vendor prepayments. In-transit is not covered with this webinar. And any precautions needed before enabling vendor prepayments? Not really. Like I said, you just need those prerequisites created and enable the features, and you're good to go.
Okay, great. Stefan, I've got another one through the Q&A portal. Is there a way to have a snapshot of open PO dollar amounts and the relevant prepaid versus outstanding amounts for all vendors in one report?
Just having a look at that question, 1 second.
Yeah, sure. It's a two-part question.
Yes, yeah, I'll just copy this question and into one of my notes. So I'll have to probably have a look into this and get back to the person.
Yeah, sure thing. No problem.
And someone just also asked me if they could show them the vendor prepayment balance on the screen. So I'm just gonna start sharing my screen again. 1 second. All right, so for the person who's asked about the vendor prepayment balance, you can't look at it on the view mode, probably because of the form, but I'll need to check that. But once you edit it, you can see the balance over here. So this is the vendor prepayment balance. And you could also look at it using the vendor. So if I go to the vendor, so this is more specific to the whole vendor prepayment account 1249, but the test vendor over here has the subsidiaries, and this has the prepayment balance specific to the vendor, and it has it based on your NZD or your base currency. In this case, there's just one currency being used. So I hope that's answered your question. And is the vendor prepayments live now on our NS system? I can't seem to see it anyway. So Sandra, it should probably be there. It just should be on your enable features. But once I'm done with this, I can have a look at your account and get back to you on that.
Great. Any more questions on your side, Stefan?
No, I'm just looking at it. I think we've covered most of them. So like I said, I just need to look at two questions. One is regarding the snapshot report, and the other one is if a vendor prepayment application can be edited after a month end. So I'm going to get back.
Brilliant. Excellent. All right. Well, a big thank you, Stefan, for working through that and the challenges you had there. Excellent.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had no idea. That never usually happens. But yeah.
All good. Look, that does sound like something that is pretty simple and easy to set up yourself. Obviously, we'll be sending out a copy of this webinar. We'll be posting it through our YouTube channel as well. So go onto YouTube and search up Liberate IT. We'll be starting to put a lot of content on there. So if you want to rewatch this webinar, go and check that out. Don't forget the NetSuite. It's like a mini Suite Connect that they're doing next week. A lot of keynote speakers from NetSuite US talking about new features and some customer stories as well. So that would be worth checking out. In the follow-up email that I'll be sending out after this, I'll send you through details around all that. Don't forget, fortnight from today, the Satori Microsoft Power BI solution. That will be very interesting. And finally, don't forget to send through any suggestions that you might have on some training topics for next year. Really keen to make sure that these are relevant to you. Really big thank you for everyone that's joined us today. That's us over and out.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
We hope this video gave you the information you were after. If you have any further questions, get in touch with us using the links in the description. At Liberate IT, we can provide free consulting to understand your business system requirements, understand your company growth plans, and provide free NetSuite demonstrations. For more information, visit our website.